You, being the refined machine that you are, require energy on a constant basis, and you require building blocks, molecular building blocks, to make the tissues, replace the tissues, and sustain your life. And that's why nutrients were one of the requirements for life back when you talked about this in chapter 1 of A&P 1. So the digestive system's job, in order to help you with this, is basically to break down whatever you consume physically and chemically. So physical first, really to get it small enough so the chemical, the enzymes, and that's what we're going to talk about with the chemistry, it's going to be an enzyme that breaks a bond in a molecule or molecules to allow them to finally be small enough that they can be passed or transferred across the plasma membrane of your cells. And most of this will take place in your small intestines, as we're going to find out. So as we begin our exploration of the digestive system, we want to keep that in mind, that yes, you are what you eat, because everything that you are consuming now, if you're listening to this, or after you listen to this, right, those molecules in there are ultimately going to become, right, they're supposed to become part of you. And the energy contained within the bonds of that food, what's holding it together in its complex structure, right, that we measure as calories, is going to be what fuels your life processes that we call metabolism. So bear that in mind, that you need so many calories a day, and those calories generally come from the food that you consume. So we have to first and foremost get the food down small enough that it can enter the body, and then it can enter a cell within the body and be taken apart in the process that you learned about called cellular respiration. Okay? So we'll look at this in this, prime objective of the system, again, is the disassembly of food, and then the ability to absorb it in the small intestine, and finally, just eliminate anything that couldn't come in, and in some cases, there's some things that reverse movement out of the body and end up in our feces. All right, so here, this is what you'll be doing in lab, looking at all of the continuous tubing we call the gastrointestinal tract or the alimentary canal, right? And so the whole system is basically this one continuous tube from oral cavity to anal cavity, and then a few of the structures along the way, like the salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, which are going to help in the process of, again, breaking down your food. All right, so I just referred here to page 1087 to look at what other systems cooperate and benefit from the digestive system, which is pretty much everything, right? Because ultimately, to be able to sustain your tissues and organs of the body, you need building blocks and you need energy. And that is provided by what's going to happen here in the digestive system. So again, the two divisions, alimentary canal, accessory structures, we're going to look at those in detail and discuss how they assist in this process of digestion. The alimentary canal, again, is one continuous tube open to the world throughout the tube and is really responsible and optimized for absorption. The accessory structures, the way I explain to students is, these are exocrine glands that will not have direct contact with the food, but will supply something to the tube through that exocrine, the ducts, to help with the process of digestion. All right. So when we look at the tube itself, and this is true for many of the tubes in your body, we saw this kind of structure when we looked at the blood vessels in the cardiovascular chapter, but here again, looking at this tube that we call the GI tract or alimentary canal, we see it broken down into 4 basic layers. All right, so there is a mucosa that surrounds the lumen, and the lumen will be where the food is. A lumen is always the inner space in the tube that something is being moved through. There's a submucosa, which is going to be a variety of connective tissues and glands to assist with the processing of food in here. And the mucosa would be responsible for secretions and absorption because it's primarily epithelium. All right, and then that submucosa with the glands and blood vessels and lymph would then connect the mucosa epithelium to the muscularis. because I said we have to move things through here. We don't have a heart that's pushing like we did with the blood vessels. So we have 2 layers of muscle here, a circular inner layer, as they show you here, and then an outer longitudinal. So this does totally encircle the tube, and this runs in the long axis of the tube. And of course, this is smooth muscle, and it is controlled by a nervous tissue, which I show here in yellow. And this would be mostly the autonomic nervous system, though there is also the enteric nervous system, and that's specifically for this. All right, and then lastly, as in all structures, there would be an outer called serosa for most of the tract, and the serosa is continuous with the serous membranes. That's where it gets its name, right? The peritoneum, in this case, but is basically simple squamous epithelium and loose areolar connective tissue to, again, hold everything together and allow the blood and lymph to come in and nerve vessels to come in. And then this serosa is continuous with the mesenteries. All right? So we look at the epithelium specifically to try to understand. It's going to be the thing that changes the most, the mucosa and the epithelium mucosa throughout the tract. So I say here you get stratified squamous, and we put that where we want to protect things. So this would be the oral cavity, the esophagus, pharynx, okay? And even then it shows up again at the end of the anal canal. Simple columnar really rules most of the mucosa. So from the stomach through up into the anal canal, you see simple columnar cells, lots of goblet cells. We put those again because mucus is a secretion to protect. And we're going to figure that out as we move along the tube. All right, so this just goes through, that previous slide was looking specifically at the epithelium and what it does. So here's our thick layer, the submucosa, dense connective tissue with vessels, nerves, glands, right? The muscularis, 2 layers. In the circular, shown here, that encircles the tube, we get thickening, where it becomes thicker in places, and those are then called sphincters. And you have a number of sphincters throughout the tract. Sphincters work like the valves did in the cardiovascular system. They control movement and allow movement. And then that outer serosa is loose areolar connective tissue, right? And it's continuous with visceral peritoneum, which is a serous membrane, hence the name serosa. Right? The tube, of course, is innervated because we said we've got to, you lose track of your food from the time you swallow till the time you defecate. And if it ever stops moving, believe me, you will know that, because stretch is one of the things that causes pain inside the body. Right? We don't have the same kind of stimuli inside the body as we did outside. A lot of times when you feel pain in the body, it's due to stretch. So if you did not move this along and experience a blockage, believe me, you would feel that in a very short period of time. So this keeps moving in spite of you. So again, we talk about the enteric nervous system here, all right, which functions like the autonomic nervous system, but it doesn't require the brain specifically to tell it what to do. So the autonomic, again, it begins in the brain and moves down the spinal cord and out to the body. So the enteric is really something intrinsic or within, right, the digestive system itself, right? So a plexus, you remember, if you might recall, is this network of nerves found in areas we talked about off the spinal cord, the cervical plexus and the brachial plexus and lumbosacral plexus. So here again, plexus, that network of nerves, we have a submucosal. So moving in, if we go back, we see, right, this submucosal plexus here, right? We call it the plexus of Meissner. You don't need to know that, right? And the myenteric, which is going to be part of the muscularis, right? This area is here, so myenteric plexus. All right? And these control, basically, this one controls the muscularis, the myenteric, whereas the submucosa is really responsible for when the cells secrete. All right? So that's within. External to the GI tract or the digestive system itself is, of course, the autonomic nervous system. So we get the brain telling the GI tract what to do, but we don't have to have the brain telling it to do everything. And this might be reminiscent of what you recall from the heart itself, which was affected by the autonomic nervous system, but did not require it for its actions. So here I color code parasympathetic is green because that's who's in charge. That's what's going to be when parasympathetic impulses are released. You are increasing or stimulating the activities of the digestive system, which means moving the food mass and on a huge level secreting enzymes and other chemicals. The sympathetic now would be the stop or inhibitor, decreasing digestive actions like mixing, moving, and secretions. So remember, rest and digest is parasympathetic. All right, blood supply, of course, we have an enormous amount of blood coming into the small intestines and throughout the tract itself, because this is, again, the sites of absorption. So we need the blood on hand so we can move the food, the nutrients, directly into the body and get them into the blood so they can be delivered. So we had huge, coming off that descending abdominal aorta, the celiac, superior and inferior mesenteric, right? And of course, they're supplying oxygen and they're picking up lots and lots of nutrients, which often go to the liver first, if you recall hepatic portal circulation. All right? The movement of nutrients into the body is called absorption, right? And so our whole body is dependent upon this process, being able for the digestive system and its structures to get food to a small enough size that we can move it across the cells and into the blood vessels. All right? So, again, I mentioned here the hepatic portal circulation. So once the capillary beds, once we move food or the small molecules from our food into the blood then, right, drained from the small intestines will go to the liver first. All right? I mentioned here, just to remind you again from the chapter on lymphatic system, that the fats and lipids that come into your body through your digestive tract actually are moved to the lymph. All of this, the lymph, of course, will join and dump the fats, fatty acids, and monoglycerides into the blood as it joins the system at the two ducts. Said when you are in the rest and digest mode, which again, you might be right now, because you might have had a nice meal and now you're just sitting back and watching a video, about a quarter of your cardiac output is going to digestive structures. All right, so to fulfill this, optimize this idea of absorption. All right, so I say here, take table 23.2 on page 1093 and keep that in front of you at all times when you're studying this chapter. It's just a really good reference, all right, to understand and see how things work together. Because the regulation is going to be where you're going to have problems. The processes that I've mentioned, some of them already, we'll just outline here and we'll assign them to each of these parts. So ingest, oral cavity, right? Propel, that's going to be throughout the whole alimentary canal. Mechanical and physical digestion, some areas do mechanical better, other mechanical physical, that's just breaking it down to smaller and smaller pieces. That's really your mouth and your stomach, right? Chemical digestion, there's a little bit of it throughout the tract, but by the time you get to the small intestine, it's really very optimized. Small intestine is really most of your absorption, and of course defecation is from the large intestines. All right? So in this cartoon, you see this idea of, again, the first, ingest, propel, mechanical digestion. So mouth, as I said, enters the canal. This is actually showing a process called peristalsis, which is a propulsion process. All right, so move it forward. When you swallow, when you defecate, and the whole process of peristalsis, which is throughout. So I just mentioned here, just to be clear, you choose to swallow and you choose to defecate. And that's about the only voluntary movement that's going to occur throughout this whole long tube. Peristalsis is what's going to rule, and it is out of your mind and out of your cerebral cortex's control. And that basically consists of a constriction behind the food mass with a relaxation in front and then a forward stimulation of the longitudinal muscle. All right? And then mechanical digestion, right? So not a chemical, not a breaking of a bond, but taking these molecules in the food and taking them from big particles to smaller and smaller and smaller particles. What this, again, technically does is increase the surface area, as I state here, but so that means that there's more ability for the chemical digestion to work, all right? So examples of this mechanical digestion are things like mastication, chewing, segmentation, and churning, right, which is what's going to happen in our stomach and small intestine.